The citrus industry is feeling the pressure of power cuts along with the rest of the country. It's having to run costly generators just to keep fruit fresh. Over the past 2 weeks, South Africa has suffered one of the worst episodes of power outages, and there's no sign of it ending. Stage 6 cuts were implemented for the first time since 2019, and farmers of various products say they're feeling the crunch. Let's discuss this further now with Justin Chadwick. He's the CEO of the Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa, and he joins us from Durban. Justin, thank you so much for your time this evening. We said there in the intro that your members are feeling the pinch at the moment because you're having to go to extreme lengths to keep your fruit fresh. But added to that is new regulations that are about to be put in place by the EU that will mean not only will your fruit have to be kept in storage for a little bit longer, it will have to be kept colder, and that means the need for even more power. Can you explain to us just shortly these new regulations about to be put in place and how much more pressure that puts on your members?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. So the new regulations have imposed what's called pre-cooling for the fruit, which we don't normally do. And that requires us to bring the fruit down to a certain temperature. And to do that, one needs to bring the fruit into the cold store and keep it in the cold store for a lot longer than normal. So that obviously will bring up the costs and also the use of the energy in terms of that. And then also the shipping temperature as well is going to be changed. Which once again will take up more energy and more costs. So definitely from the new measures that have been imposed by the EU, which, by the way, are totally uncalled for. There's no technical justification. And so we are working with government in order to actually oppose the new measures.
Oh, good. While we're talking about that, how confident are you that you're able to oppose it? Because I do believe it's got to do with the EU wanting to guard against fruit coming from the third world countries and bring it with it false codling moth incidents or something along that lines. Are you confident you could perhaps get around that and avoid it altogether?
Unfortunately, the measures have already been gazetted and promulgated in the EU, so it does make the matter a lot more difficult. However, the procedure that the EU followed in getting to these measures is against the WTO law. Normally, what happens with the new measures is that you have a certain period of time within which to adapt to any new measure, unless it's an emergency, which this clearly isn't. So in other words, most times you'll have 6 months or longer to actually adapt your systems, etc., so that you can comply. Now, in this case, they gave us 20 days, and there's another ridiculous arrangement now that they require us actually to have adopted the new system before they'd even told us about it. So it's a real charade, and unfortunately, as you mentioned, it's all about protectionism and the domestic interests of citrus producers in Europe.
That surely does sound quite astounding. Now, those new regulations is added to quite a intense cocktail that your members have already been facing, including fuel price hikes. There's exorbitant fertilizer costs, which I believe has also been fueled by the ongoing crisis in the Ukraine, and of course the increases in shipping costs. What are you hearing from your members about how they're coping with all this extra layout, all this extra capital, and indeed all this extra anxiety of this time that they find themselves in?
Yeah, it's been a bit like a horror story, and it actually started in July last year with the riots in KZN and parts of Gauteng, which crippled the industry and meant that we couldn't truck our fruit down to the port for a few weeks, and then that was followed by the cyber attack. The beginning of this year, we had the Russian invasion, as you mentioned, and then we had the floods in Durban. And so on, and now we're at stage 6 load shedding, and so that's just added to the difficulty for growers. We had a study done by the Bureau of Food and Agriculture Policy, which shows that 80% there's an 80% likelihood that growers will make a loss for the next 7 years, and so unless something is done differently. So what we're trying to do is see how we can do things differently, but definitely the load shedding doesn't help at all. To be without power for 4 or 8 hours a day when you're trying to run a modern industry, the industry is modernized incredibly over the years. We've got all sorts of electronic means to pack the fruit, to size the fruit, to see the color of the fruit so that it goes through a pack house in a very modern way. And that's the way to stay competitive. If you don't do that, then other countries catch up and overtake you. So to be without power for a while means that the packing sheds are under stress, and then obviously also the ports and the cold stores, etc. So we really are hopeful that that now that there's a wage deal that the rolling blackouts will come to an end. We've been very fortunate in eThekwini in that due to the floods, etc., and the state of the energy infrastructure here, we haven't had load shedding since it started in this last round. And so the port's been able to run without any of those problems. But we understand from the 1st of August that might change. So we're not looking forward to that.
What kind of engagement is your association trying to enter into with government? Because you've said, cold storage operators in the Durban port have been spared the real pressure of this latest round of load shedding. Are there any moves afoot for you to engage government to work to a point where our harbours and ports, important nodes of distribution for you, are protected from load shedding and somehow helping you in that way?
Definitely. So one of the things we're doing is we're working with the Agricultural Business Chamber, looking at if we can declare the ports a key strategic asset, and in that way somehow bring about the fact that they won't be subject to the load shedding. We're also working with government in terms of the new EU regulations as well, and we're engaging the WTO process to see if we can get some relief there. So we found government incredibly supportive in these times, and they view the citrus industry, which gives employment to about 130,000 people, has an income annually of between 25 and 30 billion rand, as obviously important in the economic growth of the country and to get us back onto track.
Indeed. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Justin Chadwick is the CEO of the Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa, joining us there virtually from Durban. We wish him and his members all the best during these tough times.